I want to talk about an episode of My Two Dads. So, if you don't know, I'm a sitcom junkie, and one of my favorite shows was a show that ran from 1987 to 1990 called My Two Dads. It starred Paul Reiser, Greg Evigan, and Stacey Keenan. So, there was this one episode where Michael, Joey, Nicole, and Nicole's friend Shelby, played by Amy Hathaway, all came back from a Mets game. And they were all excited. And then Nicole and Shelby went up to her room, and Shelby admitted that she's in love with one of Nicole's dads. And Nicole, of course, freaks out because who wants to find that out? They talk about it for a few minutes, and Shelby pretty much just says, like, you wouldn't understand. So later on, Shelby invites Michael, Paul Reiser's character, to go down to Klawicki's, the all-night diner that's attached to their apartment complex. And she says that she wants to buy him a milkshake to pay him back for the Mets game. And while they're there talking, she fumbles through kind of trying to flirt with him, sort of. And one thing he says is that a great thing that happened at the game was that he met somebody and he's going to go on a date with them. And he describes the person that he met as a woman with blonde hair who had a Mets cap on. And Shelby thinks it's her. So she takes that as they're going to have a date. So later on, while Michael is getting ready or just about to go on this date, Shelby shows up and he says something along the lines of, hey, Nicole, Shelby, wherever you guys are going, it's going to look a lot better because you guys are there, something like that. And he's just kind of obliviously talking about how pretty they are, and he's also getting ready for his date. While Shelby is saying things like, you can tell them, because she thinks the date is with the two of them, while she's saying that, the woman who is Michael's date shows up, and she's got blonde hair and she has a baseball cap, a Mets cap on. And then it hits Shelby that that's that what's really going on. And so she runs downstairs, she runs out, she runs downstairs to Klawicki's. So Michael, as he's figuring out what's going on, he says something to Nicole along the lines like, I treated her just like a father would. How does she deal with her father? And then Nicole says, well, she doesn't really have a father. And then it hits him. All the pieces come together, and he goes after Shelby. So Shelby's down in Klawicki's. Michael comes in and he asks her, what does she feel? What does she think of him? And, they go back and forth. They talk about what she thinks of him, why she thinks they would be a good match. And what he gets to is he's old. And he says he's older. He said that if somebody was the age that is the gap between their ages, that person would be too young for him. And then he points out that through everything she's been through, he's been there. They've been friends. I'm gonna try not to cry. This episode always gets me, and I think it's beautifully. The story is beautifully told and perfectly handled in a situation like this, which is a very touchy situation where a young girl has a crush on her friend's father, on an older man. So he points out that they've always been friends through her breakups with boyfriends and through everything else. And then he says something like, why ruin what we have? And she says, well, what do we have? And so he, in the best way possible, he says, you're my daughter's best friend, and you're always going to be there for her. And in a way, you're kind of like a daughter to me, is what he says. And she starts tearing up. And then he says, if I'm going to try not to cry. So he says, you're going to be there through all of my daughter's firsts, and you're going to be there through thick and thin. If ever in any of that time you need someone to be like a father figure to you, you can come to me. And she starts crying, and I think the best thing about this episode is that he realized that because she doesn't have a father figure, she's mistaking what they have for each other and mistaking that for romantic feelings, which happens in life. But the way he says that he wants to be a father figure to her, it's absolutely beautiful, and it's a perfect way for him to make sure she knows that he will be there for her in such a real and much more deep, meaningful way. Amy Hathaway, who plays Shelby, did a perfect job of showing those emotions of starting to break down, and then when they hug, it's an episode that really touches the heart of a lot of people, because there are a lot of people who don't have a father figure, and to have somebody, a character like Shelby Haskell's character, well, Amy Hathaway's character of Shelby Haskell, to show a character going through this and have somebody be there. I know as a kid I lived vicariously through that scene, because I've never really had a real father figure. Um, and so I break down very similar to the way she does every time I watch it. And I think Paul Reiser played it absolutely perfectly. Paul Reiser is one of my favorite comedians. He has been since I was, well, old enough to watch My Two Dads, 1987 through 1990. Anyway, this is my favorite episode. Do me a favor, if you remember it, give it a rating on a scale from 1 to 22. 22 is really the only number I'll accept, so go for it. If you remember the show, let me know, and tell me if you remember an episode of any show from when you were a kid or younger or even now that really hits home for you personally, like one that just maybe it hits and explains a situation or subject that you deal with, and it just touched your heart, and um, affected you in that way, like it had an impact on you. Let me know. Let's talk about some other shows, other episodes. I really love My Two Dads. I think they dealt with a lot of serious topics. And like I said, I'm a sitcom junkie, so I'm super proud that there's a show like this. Even though it didn't last very long, I'm proud that there's a show out there that dealt with these real topics. And I believe a lot of them, they handled these situations that are real world situations really well. Okay, so thank you for listening. Let me know if you remember this episode, this show, and what other shows or episodes you want me to talk about. I got to calm down because this episode always gets me. It was hard to talk about it without tearing up. So, okay, thank you so much. Nostalgia rules.